Book 12, Part 2 of Ovid's Metamorphoses. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michael Wolff. Metamorphoses by Publius Ovidius Naso. Translated by Brooks Moore. Book 12, Part 2. The daughter of Elatus, Caenis, was remarkable for charm, most beautiful of all Thessalian maidens. Many sighed for her in vain through all the neighbouring towns, and yours, Achilles, for that was her home. But Peleus did not try to win her love, for he was either married at that time to your dear mother, or was pledged to her. Caenis never became the willing bride of any suitor, but report declares, while she was walking on a lonely shore, the god of ocean saw and ravished her. And in the joy of that love, Neptune said, "Request of me whatever you desire, and nothing shall deny your dearest wish." The story tells us that he made this pledge, and Caenis said to Neptune, "The great wrong which I have suffered from you justifies the wonderful request that I must make. I ask that I may never suffer such an injury again. Grant I may be no longer woman, and I'll ask no more." While she was speaking to him, the last words of her strange prayer were uttered in so deep, in such a manly tone, it seemed indeed they must be from a man. That was a fact. Neptune not only had allowed her prayer, but made the new man proof against all wounds of spear or sword. Rejoicing in the gift, he went his way as Caeneus Atracides, spent years in every manful exercise, and roamed the plains of northern Thessaly. The son of bold Ixion, Pirithous wedding Hippodame, had asked his guests the cloud-born centaurs to recline around the ordered tables in a cool cave set under some shading trees. Thessalian chiefs were there, and I myself was with them there. The festal place resounded with the rout in noisy clamour, singing nuptial verse, and in the great room, filled with smoking fire, the maiden came escorted by a crowd of matrons and young married women, she most beautiful of all that lovely throng. And so Pirithous, the fortunate son of bold Ixion, was so praised by all, for his pure joy and lovely wife, it seemed his very blessings must have led to fatal harm. For savage Eurytus, wildest of the wild centaurs, now inflamed with sudden envy, drunkenness, and lust, upset the tables and made havoc there so dreadful that the banquet suddenly was changed from love to uproar. Seized by the hair, the bride was violently dragged away. When Eurytus caught up Hippodame, each one of all the centaurs took at will the maid or matron that he longed for most. The palace, seeming like a captured town, resounded with affrighted shrieks of women. At once we all sprang up, and Theseus cried, "What madness, Eurytus, has driven you to this vile wickedness? While I have life, you dare attack Pirithous. You know not what you do, for one wrong injures both." The valiant hero did not merely talk. He pushed them off as they were pressing on, and rescued her whom Eurytus had seized. Since Eurytus could not defend such deeds with words, he turned and beat with violent hands the face of him who saved the bride and struck his generous breast. By chance an ancient bowl was near at hand. This rough with figures carved, the son of Aegeus caught, and hurled it full in that vile centaur's face. He, spouting out thick gouts of blood, and bleeding from his wounds, his brains and wine mixed, kicked the blood-soaked sand. His double-membered centaur brothers, wild with passion at his death, all shouted out, "To arms! To arms!" Their courage raised by wine, in their first onset, hurled cups flew about, and shattered wine-casks, hollow basins, things before adapted to a banquet, now for death and carnage in the furious fight. Amycus first, Opinion's son, began to spoil the inner sanctuary of its gifts. He snatched up from that shrine a chandelier adorned with glittering lamps, and lifted high, with all the force of one who strives to break the bull's white neck with sacrificial axe, he dashed it at the head of Celadon, one of the Lapithae, and crushed his skull into the features of his face. His eyes leapt from his sockets, and the shattered bones of his smashed face gave way so that his nose was driven back and fastened in his throat. But Belates of Pella tore away a table-leg of maple-wood and felled Amycus to the ground, his sunken chin cast down upon his breast, and, as he spat his teeth out, mixed with blood, a second blow despatched him to the shades of Tartarus. Grineus, seeing a smoking altar, cried, "Good use for this!" with which words he raised up that heavy blazing altar. Hurling it into the middle of the Lapithae, he struck down Broteas and Orias. Mecale, mother of that Orias, was famous for her incantations, which she had often used to conjure down the shining twin horns of the unwilling moon. Exadius threatened, "You shall not escape. Let me but have a weapon." And with that he whirled the antlers of a votive stag, which he found there, hung on a tall pine-tree, and with that double-branching horn he pierced the eyes of Grineus, and he gouged them out. One eye stuck to the horn, the other rolled down on his beard, to which it strictly clung in dreadful clotted gore. Then Rhoetus snatched a blazing brand of plumwood from an altar, and whirling it upon the right, smashed through the temples of Charaxus, wonderful with golden hair. Seized by the violent flames, his yellow locks burned fiercely as a field of autumn grain. And even the scorching blood gave from the sore wound a terrific noise, as a red-hot iron in pincers, which the smith lifts out and plunges in the tepid pool, hissing and sizzling. Charaxus shook the fire from his burnt locks, and heaved up on his shoulders a large threshold stone torn from the ground, a weight sufficient for a team of oxen. The vast weight impeded him, so that it could not even touch his foe, and yet the massive stone did hit his friend Cometes, who was standing near to him, and crushed him down. Then Rhoetus, crazed with joy, exulting, yelled, "I pray that all of you may be so strong." Wielding his half-burned stake with heavy blows again and again, he broke the sutures of his enemy's skull, until the bones were mingled with his oozing brains. Victorious, then rushed he upon Evagris, and Corythus, and Dryas. First of these was youthful Corythus, whose cheeks were then just covered with soft down. When he fell dead, Evagris cried, "What glory do you get, killing a boy?" But Rhoetus did not give him time for uttering one word more. He pushed the red-hot stake into the foeman's mouth, while he still spoke, and down into his lungs. He then pursued the savage Dryas, while whirling the red fire fast about his head, but not with like success. For while he still rejoiced in killings, Dryas turned and pierced him with a stake where neck and shoulder meet. Rhoetus groaned, and with a great effort pulled the stake out from the bone, then fled away, drenched in his blood. And Ornius followed him. Lycabas fled, and Medon, with a wound in his right shoulder. Thormas and Pisanor and Murmerus fled with them. Murmerus, who used to excel all others in a race, ran slowly, crippled by a recent wound. Pholus and Melanius ran for their lives, and with them Abas, hunter of wild boars, and Asbolus, the augur, who in vain had urged his friends to shun that hapless fight. As Nessus joined the rout, he said to him, "You need not flee, for you shall be reserved a victim for the bow of Hercules." But neither Lycidas, Eurynomus, nor Areus, nor Imbrius had escaped from death. For all of these the strong right hand of Dryas pierced, as they confronted him. Cranaeus there received a wound in front. Although he turned in flight, as he looked back, a heavy javelin between his eyes pierced through him, where his nose and forehead joined. In all this uproar, Aphidas lay flat, in endless slumber from the wine he drank, incessant, and his nerveless hand still held the cup of mixed wine as he lay full stretched upon a shaggy bearskin from Mount Ossa. When Phorbas saw him, harmless in that sleep, he laid his fingers in his javelin's thong and shouted loudly, "Mix your wine down there with waters of the Styx," and, stopping talk, let fly his javelin at the sleeping youth. The ashen shaft, iron-tipped, was driven through his neck, exposed as he by chance lay there, his head thrown back. He did not even feel a touch of death, and from his deep-pierced throat his crimson blood flowed out upon the couch, and in the wine-bowl still grasped in his hand. I saw Petreius when he strove to tear up from the earth an acorn-bearing oak, and while he struggled with it back and forth and was just ready to wrench up the trunk, Pirithous hurled a well-aimed spear at him, transfixed his ribs, and pinned his body tight, writhing to that hard oak. And Lycus fell, and Chromis fell, before Pirithous. They gave less glory to the conqueror than Helops or than Dictys. Heliops was killed by a javelin which pierced his temples from the right side,